Welcome to my fourth travel log, and I am glad that you have joined me. I'm getting ready to go to Bethlehem and also to the Shepherd's Fields in Herodian and also Jericho. Our plan is to go to Bethlehem first, and much like the three wise men heading to see where Jesus was born, I was going with Twins Tours, Tony and Andre, and the three of us, the three kind of wise guys, going to see where Jesus was born. As we start off and head towards Bethlehem, there are signs of peace everywhere. Unfortunately, the gate was closed. They weren't letting people through on this day. But not to worry. Twins Tours always has an end around. We're going to go to Herodian first and then to Bethlehem through the back roads. Now, this entire day is going to be in the West Bank in Israel. And I need to unpack a little bit about what the West Bank is. There are three classifications in the West Bank: A, B, and C. A, the sections in red. The easy way to remember this would be A is for Arab. A section is Palestinian controlled only. And so Israeli military and police have no presence there. B is both the sections in gray. It's in between, and there are Palestinian police there, and there were also Israeli presence authorities there. And then C, you can remember that by C for chosen people, which would be the section that is light green. Those are Israeli sections that are controlled only by the Israeli army and are where most of the settlements, the Jewish settlements in the West Bank, are. Now, Bethlehem and Jericho and pretty much everywhere that we are going today are all in A zone, Palestinian only area. And so luckily the Twins Tours, Andre and Tony, are Palestinian Arab Christians, and so they are able to freely go in and out of all three, A, B, and C sections, whereas Jewish tour guides are not allowed into the A sections of the West Bank. As we're driving around the back roads, you can see the wall that has been built around the West Bank for security reasons. You can also see how beautiful the countryside is. These are the fields that the shepherds would have been in and around Bethlehem. As we get closer to Herodian, which is the palace that Herod built for himself, he wanted to see Jerusalem from his palace, and so the mountain on the left, he basically cut off and moved it onto the mountain on the right so that the mountain he built his palace on would be twice as tall, so he could see Jerusalem from the top of his palace. Up on top of Herodian, you can see here the Jewish settlement. You can tell the Jewish settlements a lot of times by the red roofs, but this is in area B. As we move into the visitor center, we see a model of what Herodian looked like when Herod built it, along with his palace up at the top of the mountain. We started out at the theater, and even though it wasn't open, we got to go into the VIP area where Herod would have entertained his guests in the box seating area. Inside this special area that Herod would have kept for himself and his VIP guests was pretty cool. There was even some of the original artwork painted on the walls that had been uncovered. We then went outside to where Herod's tomb had been discovered and subsequently uncovered. This is Herodian, the mountain palace of Herod the Great. And this is the archaeological dig recently discovered of his tomb, a recreation of that here. You can see the black line there at the bottom. That's the representing this, what we have. And he built this entire palace by basically moving a mountain. This mountain right here used to be much taller. And this mountain he built his palace on wasn't high enough, so he took the top of that mountain off and put it on top of this one. We climbed this ginormous staircase of steps that went all the way to the top, and at the top there was some of the original stucco art on the wall, and it opened up into this huge courtyard. As you can see, the view from Herod's palace here is spectacular. You can see all the way to the Mount Olives. The three towers there in the background. You can see a shepherd with some sheep right down there in the fields. I thought it was also kind of interesting that they found a signet ring from Pilate, Pontius Pilate, here at Herodion. As we left the upper plateau, we went down into the tunnels into the heart of the mountain where they had the cisterns, and then ultimately out to the parking lot where we took the back roads into Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a small town surrounded by rolling hills, and apparently they grow cars on trees here and have such famous coffee shops as Stars and Buck's Cafe. We walked up to the Church of the Nativity, and this is one of the oldest churches. It's over 1,600 years old because it generally hasn't been destroyed as each successive empire took over the land. Each one respected this particular church for various reasons. And the entrance is interesting because it's got the original entrance. It's actually a double entrance in the background. You can't see it here, but you'll see it later, is the Queen Helena entrance. And then in the 7th century, Justinian put that large archway, the outer one, in. And then in the 11th century, when the Crusaders came, they, because of security reasons, made the door smaller, and you can see that Gothic arch kind of in the middle. And then when the Turks, after the Crusaders, the Turks took over the land, and the church kind of went into disrepair, and they were bringing camels and horses into the church. And the Franciscan priest complained to the Sultan, and so he put a decree out that they would make the door even smaller so that the camels and horses couldn't get through. And so now the door is so small that you have to actually duck to get into the building. Once inside, you enter this huge sanctuary and go to the right to get to the area where Jesus was born. As you step into one of the back rooms of the church, you see a very ornate room, which is one of the main entrances to the grotto, the cave where Jesus was born. We were really fortunate because of Corona and other travel restrictions. There was almost nobody in the line in front of us. Often the line can stretch clear out the front doors of the church to get in to see the place where Jesus was born. Once you get inside, on the right, you can see a spot that has a 14-point silver star, which designates the spot where Jesus was traditionally born. And I looked inside to see if I could see anything, but I couldn't see anything. People would show up with large piles of rosaries and rub them on the spot so it would have a special blessing, and they could sell the rosaries for more money, I guess. On the other side of the room was the spot where the manger was, where Jesus was placed. After you leave the grotto, there's a number of sanctuaries, very ornate, Greek Orthodox, Catholic, and Armenian spaces around the building. They also have the official fake baby Jesus that goes in the manger every year at Christmas time on display. And there are also some pretty beautiful walkways and courtyards in the structure. After we left the Church of the Nativity, we headed over to Shepherd's Fields, which is the traditional spot that the shepherds were at when the angels visited them. There's a nice little chapel on location there with lots of light, which represents the light that the angels brought with them to the shepherds at night. Around the inside of the chapel are murals depicting the story of the shepherds in the story of Jesus' birth. This one is interesting as it shows the shepherd holding the lamb. And the tradition of shepherds was that when a little lamb would not stay with the flock and would wander off, which was in danger of getting eaten by wild animals, predators, the shepherd would gently bring it back into the fold, and if it would do that, keep running off multiple times, the shepherd would hold the sheep close and break one of its legs, and then bind it up, knowing that the little lamb would heal very quickly. But for the period of time, a couple of weeks that it was healing, the shepherd would hold the lamb and carry it everywhere it went, and then in that way the lamb would learn to know the shepherd's voice and to know the shepherd was the one who fed it and kept it safe from wild animals. We see David, who identifies God as a shepherd, a great shepherd, and in his psalm of repentance, Psalm 51, he says in verse 8, "Make me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones which you have broken rejoice." This is a pretty cool imagery of what a shepherd does in this chapel dedicated to the shepherds. Down below the chapel are the caves where the shepherds kept sheep. And in one of the caves down in there, there were a manger and an area on the side, which was very similar to when Jesus was born. He would have been born in that little side area and then placed in the manger inside of the cave. As we came back out of the cave, you could see the hillsides where all the shepherds would have been watching their flocks, and even see modern day flocks still there. And we even saw a little boy carrying around a little lamb, although I don't think its leg was broken. Next, we headed out to our last stop, which was Jericho. Andre decided to take me the back roads that only the locals use on the way through the wilderness between Bethlehem and Jericho. Along the way, we saw people riding donkeys, and we dropped below sea level on our way down into the Rift Valley that leads to the Dead Sea. This is just above Jericho. This is part of the original road that went from Jerusalem to Jericho, which would have been the road that the traveler that Jesus talked about in the story of the Good Samaritan would have been traveling along and got attacked by bandits. As you can see, it's really not much more than a trail along the side of a mountain valley. From Jericho, this road goes all the way up to Jerusalem. As we head down into Jericho, you can see groves of palm trees. Jericho is known as the city of palms. These are all date palms. They're growing huge date harvests, and some of the best dates in the world are grown here. You also see a sycamore tree, because that's one of the other stories that happened here. Zacchaeus, a wee little man, climbed up into a sycamore tree because he wanted to see Jesus. And so they have the Zacchaeus tree here in town. Another thing that's here in Jericho that I didn't realize is this is the traditional spot where Jesus was tempted by Satan when he went into the wilderness. Up on the mountainside there, Mount Temptation, is the spot where he looked out over the city, and Satan offered him the kingdoms of the world. Of course, after you look at Mount Temptation, you can go into the Temptation Market, and who knows what you can find there. Probably best if you just stay away. And the main reason I wanted to come to Jericho was because of the Old Testament story of Joshua fighting the Battle of Jericho. And it's interesting that because Jericho is in a zone of the West Bank, then the Palestinians control it, and they are not much interested in proving any part of the Bible true. And so they don't allow any archaeological work to be done on this location. It had just rained recently, and I found just pottery shards lying everywhere that had been washed away as a little bit of mud washed off the surface of the earth. It's quite amazing, and really gold mined if at some point Jericho is allowed to be excavated by archaeologists. And of course, no one can leave the West Bank without taking a camel ride. My camel's name was Scooby-Doo, and he was pretty awesome. I had a lot of fun riding the camel around, and I didn't even fall off. Look, Ma, no hands. Well, thanks for joining me for my 4th travel log. I'll have another one coming out in about a week. Hit like and subscribe, and I will see you later.